Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the program. Today we're going to talk about elongated skulls that were found in China near the Manchuria, where modern day Manchuria, the Manchurian plains here. So you can see geography of the place. Here are the steppes, and then the Manchuria plains and then the Korean peninsula here. So they found the skulls, which are about 12,000 years old, around this area here, known as Hutalmuga. And here it is. Here's the northeastern plain here. So it does make sense that there were people living here at that time. Just because, again, you have a network of rivers here. You have these natural barriers, these two mountain ranges in the west and in the southeast, as well as in the northeast as well. So you have this really, really ideal spot for a civilization or a population to grow. And then here's another map right here. You can see it in relation to Japan and Korea and Beijing and Shanghai. So yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff here. So these ancient tombs in that area, again, they're producing some of the oldest known human skulls to be intentionally reshaped. Intentionally. So there are some elongated skulls out there that are purported to be just normal, the way they are. Like King Tut is one of those. Akhenaten is also one of those as well. So it's very interesting that we have, not just in China, but all over the world. There are in South America as well, parts of Russia, and Africa. There are these people who have taken upon this practice within their culture and their traditions, and the reasons are still up in the air. They don't know, but one of the theories revolves around these people who are trying to emulate someone else, and it's always the people who are elongating their skulls in this way are always high class people, high society. So it's very interesting that it's only those people that seem to be obsessed with doing a cultural practice such as this. So anyway, at this site called Hutalmuga, these Chinese scientists unearthed 25 skeletons dating to between 12,000 years and 5,000 years ago. Of those 25 skeletons, 11 featured skulls with artificially elongated brain cases, which is what they call it in this article, or skulls, and flattened bones at the front and back of the head. Very interesting stuff. So permanent reshaping of the skull early in life when cranial bones are soft can be achieved by compressing an infant's head with one's hands, and then they bind the head with a hard flat surface such as like a board or some other tightly wrapped cloth around the head, which again remodels this quote immature cranial bones, because again, babies do have soft bones, and even today when babies lay down in their cradles, and some people grow up with a flat spot on the back of their head from laying down in on their pillow when they're infants. So this is not out of the blue here. That this is all accepted science. Like, it's possible to take a malleable infant skull and shape it to some extent, in this case an elongated extent, and live to be a normal adult. So oddly shaped intentionally modified skulls have been found in many parts of the world. In the 1980s, two roughly 45,000-year-old Neanderthal skulls had been reshaped. And I mean, it says in the article that they've been dismissed by many researchers, but I've heard about this. And if Neanderthals were doing this tens of thousands of years ago, then it makes it that much more interesting that we have Homo sapiens repeating that same tradition. And that fuels the speculation even further that perhaps Neanderthals and sapiens had a closer relation than we even know about. Because again, if people like the Neanderthals, a mysterious group of people, were doing that, and then Homo sapiens are doing that thousands and thousands of years later, then that must mean that there must have been some sort of common origin, some common interaction that our species had with Neanderthals. The earliest skulls with generally accepted signs of cranial modification date to between around 13,000 and 10,000 years ago in Western Asia, Southeast Australia, and now East Asia. So all of these places are very, very close geographically speaking. So again, that makes a lot of sense. It follows logic that these people were, again, somehow or another interacting with each other and then also adopting each other's customs. Or they must have come from a single common population that had these customs, which dispersed, and they just kept those customs. Either way, it's indicative of some sort of relation between these populations who did this body cranial modification practice. It's too early to tell whether intentional cranial modification first emerged in East Asia and spread elsewhere, or originated independently in different places. Again, yeah, that's what I just talked about. And I think, if I had to guess, again, it's too early, there's not enough evidence, but if I had to guess, it must have originated, I think, in one or two places. I don't think it would have originated independently, because if it were to originate independently, it seems like there would be varied methods of doing so, but it seems like everything's pretty uniform. But again, who knows? It's too early to tell. This place was excavated from 2011 to 2015, so a 4-year project. The skull was found in a tomb dating to 13,000 and 11,000 years ago, and based on cells of pottery found in the same sediment layer. Also, with the sediment data and the pottery dating, they also radiocarbon dated the skeleton, which also placed it around 12,000 years old. And then the two sediment layers dating between 6,300 and 5,000 years ago contain 10 skeletons, also with reshaped skulls. So they have a really old skull dating to the onset of the Younger Dryas, 13,000 years ago, and then they have other skulls, 10 other skulls with reshaped heads, skeletons with reshaped skulls, dating to about half the time, more than half. Of the 5 modified skulls, 4 came from men and 1 from a woman. The estimated ages at death for the 11 individuals range from 3 to 40. Very interesting. Again, I mentioned earlier, it seems that this practice is reserved for high-status individuals or certain families. The 3-year-old child with an elongated skull was buried with large amounts of pottery and other artifacts, suggesting that this infant came from a rich family. And one was buried with shell ornaments, again denoting her high status. An adult and adolescent with modified skulls were also buried together, suggesting they came from the same family. But the oldest skull, here's what they're saying now. The oldest skull from 13,000 years ago probably wasn't intentionally modified. So that one wasn't intentionally modified. They must have been born that way, according to the researchers. The tops of the skulls that are modified include a slight depression near the back, apparently. So the solid evidence of cranial reshaping at this site, the Huttamuga site, goes back only 6,000 years. So there's a disagreement here. Wang, he's the scientist from Texas A&M who's involved. He disagrees and thinks the 12,000-year-old brain case exceeds any naturally occurring variations in skull shape, and he thinks probably the bone flattening goes back toward then as well. So again, more needs to come out. But either way, whether the body modification thing happened 6,000 years ago or 13,000 years ago, still doesn't change the fact that this is happening all over the world, and there's something to this. There's a reason why it's reserved for people who are high status, and there's a reason why that there's good reason to believe, anyway, that they're trying to emulate something bigger than them, or something that was valuable back in the day that also had some sort of elongated skull. Maybe it was a sign of being enlightened, or maybe they're trying to emulate some offshoot of humanity that happened to have elongated skulls, and maybe they had greater physical capabilities or mental capabilities. Who knows? Something is, again, monkey see, monkey do. They're trying to emulate something. They're trying to capture something, if I had to guess. The human skull discovered by workers at an underwater sand mine in northeastern China displays intentionally flattened bones at the front and back of the brain case as well. Radiocarbon dating puts that skull between 11,245 and 11,200 years old. Again, very, very ancient. This is right around the time of the Younger Dryas impact event, or the Younger Dryas boundary. So it's very interesting that there are people there with this seemingly advanced practice. Chinese findings have expanded the known distribution of ancient skull reshaping beyond Europe and Central Asia. The 12,000-year-old Hutamuga skull, they think it's also intentionally remodeled. And she says this new report draws a picture of an entrenched tradition that continued for millennia, and that's definitely true as well. This has continued for a long time, and you just can't help but wonder why go through all this? What upside is there to having an elongated skull? Do they know something we don't? Are they able to? Here's another theory that I heard. Maybe it comes from the theory that the brain is, instead of a junction box that produces consciousness, that is actually an antenna that tunes into consciousness, and maybe altering the skull shape somehow alters that antenna. Maybe it raises consciousness or something like that, or maybe it allows you to tap into something. Who knows? A lot of this is all speculation, but it's fun to speculate and see as the evidence piles up. It's interesting to see how it all plays out. So anyway, let me know what you guys think about this. I think this body modification thing, the fact that it goes back so far, is so interesting that there has to be some sort of origin there. It couldn't have just been some haphazard, hey, let's just do this out of nothing. At its origin, there must have been a specific reason for these diverse cultures to adopt this practice. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. I'll have a video for you guys either tomorrow or on the weekend, and I'll talk to you guys later.